Ambassador Satish Chandra, Air Marshal Sandeep Singh, Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary, Ross McInnes, Hugh Jeffrey. I request all the dignitaries of the inaugural session of the 9th edition of the India Defence Conclave to please come up on stage. I welcome all of you. Can I have a round of applause, please, for them? Ladies and gentlemen, wish you all a very good morning. A very warm welcome to you all to the 9th edition of the India Defence Conclave. On stage and in the audience I see in front of me a lot of faces who have been with us since the first edition of the Conclave in 2016 to the 9th edition today. I thank all of them and the rest of you in this hall today for having held our hand and helped us grow from a one-portal startup to 3 niche and specialized online portals today. Many of you already know this, but a quick recap of our journey. Bharat Shakti was raised in 2015 with a focus on the Indian defense industry, especially MSMEs, and export of Indian products. We organized the first edition of our annual marquee event, the Defense Attachés Conclave, a few months later. Over the years, we expanded, launched Strat News Global in 2020, Interstellar.news in 2023. The scope and focus of the conclave also increased, and in its 6th edition in 2021, we renamed it the India Defence Conclave. Let us start the day. I see many defense attachés here. I would like to welcome you warmly this morning. The overarching theme this year is Stabilizing Force, India in an Uncertain World. Countries in the Indian Ocean region, and especially those in South and Southeast Asia, are faced with the fallout of a major churn, China's hegemony and belligerence. Nations have to prepare to defend their sovereignty, values and cultures amidst external and domestic threats. They have to be prepared for the full spectrum of conflict. India has boosted the pace of its defense preparedness in order to be a power, contributing to the stability of the Indian Ocean region. Let us now get on to today's conclave. All of you have received a copy of the agenda, so you can see we have a power-packed day with stellar speakers. In addition to the proceedings of the seminar, we will also utilize this opportunity to present the 2nd Bharat Shakti Lifetime Achievement Award. For the sake of brevity, I will not be detailing the profiles of all our speakers. They will be flashed on the screen as they come up, and a copy is also on your tables for you to peruse. I would also like to highlight that several of our partners have painstakingly put up information kiosks in our exhibition area. Some are in this hall, some are in the adjacent area. I urge all of you to please visit each one of these kiosks and familiarize yourselves with what they have to offer. I now request Mr. Nitin A. Gokhale, founder and editor-in-chief, bharatshakti.in, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Nilanjana. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's always good to see old friends. We will make some new friends today, I hope. And of course, this is something that we do every year. And we do it with a lot of apprehension whether we will be able to pull it off, because we are a very small team of core members of 4 or 5 people who do this. So if there are any slip-ups, if there are any shortcomings, please forgive us. We are not event managers, but we are basically researchers, journalists, but trying to do multitasking here. So welcome to the 9th edition of India Defence Conclave, which is our annual marquee event, as I mentioned, that brings together all relevant stakeholders. My name is Nitin Gokhale. I'm the founder and CEO of Bharat Shakti, a group of 3 digital defense and strategic affairs platforms established over the past decade, as Nilanjana has already mentioned. Our focus is on research, analysis, and commentary on defense industry, foreign affairs, and critical technologies such as space, AI, quantum, across bharatshakti.in, stratnewsglobal.com, and interstellar.news, 3 digital portals that we run. Since 2016, Bharat Shakti, the platform supporting India's quest for self-reliance in defense, has organized this annual marquee event. This year's conference is our biggest so far. Hopefully, we will increase the size even next year, which will be our 10th anniversary. Top military officials from India and abroad, Indian and foreign defense industry stalwarts, think tank representatives, advisors, defense and military advisors of different countries posted in India are among the core audience. For the event, serving Indian military officers also attend so that they can interact with the industry, also see for themselves the products that are on display. And they have been part of this for every edition since 2016. I like to describe ourselves as a matchmaker, bringing diverse stakeholders together on one platform every September or October. On a lighter note, since then, this event has developed into a dating app akin to shadi.com perhaps. People meet, have a period of courtship, decide whether they are compatible before consummating the marriage or part ways, whatever the case may be. The packed auditorium is perhaps testimony to the popularity of this dating app. But more seriously, we have an intellectually rich and information-packed program through the day. Before the business session begins, we have a special ceremony to honor Ambassador Satish Chandra, one of my mentors, the man who set up the National Security Council Secretariat nearly 25 years ago. But more of that a little later. More than 30 companies, big and small, are part of the conclave. A small and compact exhibition by different defense firms, which is just behind you, is a crucial part of this event. Do make it a point to visit each of them. You might find something useful there. The theme of this year's meet is Stabilizing Force, India in an Uncertain World. Among the sub-themes that would be discussed in different knowledge sessions are, of course, first session after the inaugural is some of the industry leaders talking about forging winning partnerships. There is a session on future in Atmanirbharta or self-reliance in defense, ammunition and armament roadmap for the Indian Armed Forces, Make in India for the world, which is perhaps going to be the focus of the government of India and the industry. There is also a session on defense exports, which the government is again emphasizing that India must become a defense exporter rather than a net importer of defense equipment, which it has been for years together. Then there is an interesting session on Indo-Pacific futures, navigating the new normal, and we have guests from Australia, from the United States, also from France. They are, of course, speaking in different sessions, but that is what we are going to discuss. How does Indo-Pacific look, say, 5 years from now? And then there is, of course, the final icing on the cake, if I may say so. You will hear Chief of Defense Staff, General Anil Chauhan, doing a chat with me at the end of the program, which is towards the evening. And that will have some takeaways, I'm sure, for a lot of people. At the end of the business sessions, we like our guests to let their hair down and carry the conversations forward over drinks and dinner. So stay on and enjoy the day's proceedings. I promise you, you will not go back disappointed. Before I conclude, let me once again extend a warm welcome to everyone present here. We are also incidentally live streaming this session, or the entire day's session, in fact, sessions on our YouTube channel. Let me end here before my MC gives me a stern look for exceeding my time. Have a good day.
Thank you, Nitin. I would now request Air Marshal Sandeep Singh, retired, military advisor to the National Security Council Secretariat, to please deliver the special address. A few words about him very quickly. He is the former Vice Chief of the Indian Air Force, served as Deputy Chief of the Air Staff, was Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Southwestern Air Command, served as instructor at IF's Test Pilot School and was Chief Test Pilot at ASTE. He commanded ASTE 11 Wing and 30 Squadron, and the Sword of Honor recipient has over 4,780 flying colors. I request you, sir, to please deliver the special address. Thank you. Can I have a round of applause for the Air Marshal, please? Thank you.
A very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be back here as part of this widely awaited India Defence Conclave organized by Bharat Shakti, and my congratulations to all the organizers, and especially Nitin, who has, as he himself said, nurtured this event so very well that it has grown in its stature and impact for all of us. I'm honored to be part of the esteemed panel of speakers who will follow for today's seminar, and also a great audience, all of you who have a great commitment towards the security, global security and national security. I only have one complaint to make. Last year also, when Nitin had said for me to speak, he had said talk about critical and emerging technologies, and last minute he said, no, you're part of the inaugural session, and coming from NSCS, you may switch to national security perspectives. He did that this time when he said, okay, you will be up there in the beginning, talk about national security perspectives. Then he said, since you are starting it, please talk about the theme of this, and which is a little different, but stabilizing forces, India in an uncertain world. Anyway, given his old acquaintances and friendship with, starting from the founding members to the late members of NSCS, NSAB, so many of them are here, I think he manages to push us at NSCS to improve our strategic and tactical agility, okay? And also train us to spend late working hours like last night. Anyway, talking about strategic agility, in fact, I've been talking about this term. I've not seen it too much in security, but it comes from a corporate world. But if you look at the dictionary meaning of it, it is so very important and relevant in strategic circles, that having strategic agility in today's complex world is important for all of us, and I believe all of us in the audience also who are in the business of security. And this is a key element of being strategically agile. My own boss, NSA, talks about it very often, that how surprises will be there by the very definition. Many people, when they say that how some countries, or many a times, all of them get surprised by a certain turn of events, surprises will happen. It is the strategic agility with which you can respond to that and overcome those events. Coming to another aspect, being a military man myself, we all know that humankind's history actually has been a history of conflicts, actually. That's how it has been written. It's a sad part, but that's what it is. Even our own great epics, be it Ramayana, Mahabharata, or even Bhagavad Gita, the wars have been central to it. But rather than delving in the past, if we jump to the current 21st century, we do see there is after a little gap in some conflicts, perhaps towards the later part of last century, again, a rise in conflicts. We all know that. And the situation has become geopolitically, strategically, extremely volatile, including other forms of security, be it the COVID pandemic, with the world is, I think, still part of it is recovering from it. And I think every year, the growing intensity and severity of weather-related critical events. So, as I say again, I think our hands, all of us in security, our hands are full, but I think there are, in a way to look at it, there are exciting times ahead for all of us. And that including people who are supporting the business of security, a large number of people, industrialists who are promoting how to manage global security issues. In the last 2 decades, we have seen significant shift of global power dynamics, I think characterized by the rising influence of multilateralism, as we see, both by state and non-state actors. At the beginning of this century, we were talking about a lot of shift towards the Indo-Pacific, which still remains a major area of future concern. But the 2 recent conflicts, I think, have brought the spotlight back towards Europe and Middle East. So I think if you look from a satellite, an IR satellite, I think the hotspots have started spreading out all over. So again, to repeat, I think as all of us navigate this complex and volatile world, we need to have some feeling that how we can stabilize that, and that brings to the underlying theme, which Nitin had, as I mentioned, said that we can talk about it. I think India, with its carefully balanced strategic autonomy, a very potent word, certainly stands out as a stabilizing force, not only in the region, but in the whole world. Our geographic centrality in the Indian Ocean, coupled with our military capabilities, growing military capability, and a robust economy, positions us as a pivotal player to stabilize the security concerns globally across. And I think that has been realized all over the world. This role of ours is not just shared by our geography, but our history and our civilization and democratic values, and a vision for peaceful and prosperous world. Our leaders have often mentioned the word Vishwamitra, or universal friend, and except under grave provocation, India has stayed true to this. During the last year's G20 summit, we all know that an old word, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, in its wider aspect, started being propagated as one world, one family, one future. And I think that has resonated well, and it continues to do that all across the globe. But I'd say that the clearest articulation of this role of India was made by our Prime Minister during the Gujarat summit in January this year, and I quote, "The world looks at India as an important pillar of stability, a friend who can be trusted, a partner who believes in people-centric development, a voice that believes in global good," unquote. But getting back to some of the challenges that the world faces, and I will cover just a few. Today, hybrid wars are blurring the lines between state and non-state actors, as I have mentioned earlier, exploiting vulnerabilities across multiple domains. In fact, being in the business, the domains which you used to talk about keep getting added, I think, every alternate year of the domains in which conflicts will be fought. And pardon my pun, the gray zone or gray zone conflict have really come out of the gray zone and has become an important part of our security lexicon or security calculus now. And that will continue to remain so, even more importantly, in our area of interest around us. Also, I think economic and tech wars between major power players have become important. I think rare earth monopolies or an old book, but again, chip wars have become buzzword, and that will create financial security concerns all over. I would just like to say there is a session later in logistics, ammunition and all, but it's critical, and we have been talking about it with our military also, that the critical importance of robust logistics, ammunition reserves, and the capability to rapidly ramp up production. And I think all the militaries, ministries involved in it, and the industries have realized that globally, that the need for ramping up production quickly when the need arises is important. I'll come back to the climate change also once again, that it certainly threatens our ecosystems, food security, human well-being, extreme weather events are rising, the sea levels and sea levels are rising, water resources would get shorter, and the area around us is particularly vulnerable. And again, at NSA, as directed by NSA, and particularly, I see the chairman is here of NSAB, National Security Advisor Board, we are looking very critically at the security implications of this climate change and its impact globally and especially around us. I think later in the conclave, service chief starting with the air chief, and as Nitin mentioned, the CDS also would give a more in-depth insight. However, I would like to highlight that our forces, the defense forces, are rapidly undergoing modernization, establishing joint structures, a process which has already started and implemented in many spheres, and also introduction of cutting-edge technologies, ranging all across. Also important, and I think I have repeated this last year also, that both public and private sector, both are here, have really stepped in to support the defense forces, Indian defense forces, in this process of their modernization, in consonance with the Atmanirbharta or self-reliance that our government has so strongly pushed for. MSMEs and startups, and we are adding them very, very fast in our country. In fact, that itself is an issue, that how to nurture them and bring them up. But they have added a lot of dynamism, excitement, and innovativeness in our ecosystem now. And I think Bharat Shakti has been particularly involved, perhaps, in promoting that. While Make in India remains the cornerstone of our national strategy, I would say, we welcome collaborations with foreign partners for joint development, joint design, and joint production, combined or individually also, element-wise. I think this process has started and rapidly increasing. We ourselves meet many of our partners from other countries who are willing to join us in that journey of ours. Also, seminars and conferences, especially the ones like this, play a pivotal role in raising awareness and facilitating these collaborations or alliances through the apps which he talked about, which I'm sure has been helping. And I just don't say that the divorce has happened very quick. I think the relations which have been built up in such things have endured for a longer period, true to the Indian way of things, the way it happens, I think. 2 or 3 critical emergencies. I think it's a given that the drones, the way they have come in all field, it's strange, and I often quote that military weapon systems started with land systems, historically or prehistorically. Sea military systems came in, and aviation came in the last, in fact, just beginning of last century. But the unmanning of that, just the reverse has happened. It's strange that I think aerial unmanned systems started first, the marine systems, and it's actually most difficult to still get that robo-dog or a mule going. But the drones or unmanned systems are there to stay. Our challenge is how to manage their integration between manned and unmanned systems. I think the conference on disarmament in UN, and that again we are handling at NSCS, the debate is already starting on how much autonomy the lethal weapon systems can get, how much autonomy or AI or generative AI in military system can have. That debate has started, and India is part of that. Again, from our office, we are collating our standpoint. It's a complex debate, the way the nuclear, this thing had started. So that's a new thing, that while these technologies and AI is coming in, there would be a need somehow to regulate them also. Otherwise, it portends. Counter-drone is another area. I think, but the drones, the way they are proliferating the swarms and becoming intelligent, the standard counter-drone systems will not be effective. So you have low cost per shot kill systems which will be required. Otherwise, the economics of it, as it's being seen in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, will be there. So we are also looking for partnerships, I think, for directed energy or laser and high power wave. That would be a future to counter the ever-increasing number of drones and their cost reducing. I'll leave it. Space is an important sector. This time you're not covering space in greater detail, perhaps separately, but it remains. But very important that as the space systems get threatened, the old adage of, I think, safety in numbers is important. All over the world, getting into lower orbits with larger number of satellites and constellation, perhaps is the way forward. And also with like-minded countries, friendly countries, collaboration in space will be important. India has already moved ahead, and I think that's the future. It adds to our overall resilience and partnerships with friendly country in space. So coming back to the theme. I sincerely believe that the way our country has moved forward, we are a very powerful force in global stability, and I'm sure we shall continue to remain so, or if not, grow it. If you are tracking the recent events which are happening, which gets debated, what India is doing in international forum. So I would once again congratulate you, Nitin, for this well-attended and excellent annual conclave of yours, and I'm sure all of us will go enriched with the knowledge that will be shared amongst all of us. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. That was Air Marshal Sandeep Singh, retired military advisor to the NSCS. And now we will have a series of special addresses on forging winning partnerships. We have been joined by Mr. J.D. Patil, member of the Executive Committee of Management and advisor, PES and Smart Technologies to the CMD, Larsen & Toubro. Sir, I request you to please come up on stage. Can I have a round of applause for Mr. Patil, please? The special addresses on forging winning partnerships will talk about whether Indian defense sector is ready to meet the requirements of self-reliance. How can foreign OEMs forge partnerships in India to strengthen the defense sector? And why is it important to create networks and collaborations across geographies? We were also supposed to have Mr. Baba Kalyani, but unfortunately he is indisposed, he's unable to travel. But despite being unwell, he has sent us a video message, which we will now play on the screen for you, after which I will request Mr. J.D. Patil to please deliver his address. Could I have Shri Baba Kalyani's address, please, on screen?
Dear Nitin, your 9th edition of the India Defence Conclave, I have unfortunately not able to attend because of certain conditions, and I really wish the conclave all the very best. All the honorable guests, the subject of the conclave is very exciting. India, a stabilizing force in an uncertain world. As you know, the Indian economy is growing at a very rapid pace. It's one of the fastest growing economy today, and many people around the world are giving us a much better chance than what we had earlier in this. And Morgan Stanley has predicted that India will have almost 20% of the growth of the world economy in the next 10 years. Obviously, without India, the world economy will not look very good. And that's how India is going to be a stabilizing force. In the area of defense, thanks to the policies of the Indian government, the Honorable Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, and all the services that have helped create this whole Atmanirbhar mission successful, and the targets that the Honorable Prime Minister has set, and including the Honorable Defense Minister, for India and Indian industry to export defense products and create a defense exports of about $5 billion by the next year. I think we are very confident of making this happen. Indian industry has become very mature in many areas where we are operating today. We have products that are better than the best products in the world. Of course, in many areas we have a long way to go, but clearly this shows the entrepreneurship, this shows the capability of young Indian minds, capability of young Indian scientists, and thanks to Bharat Shakti for making this event possible. And thank you, Nitin, but I'm sorry I'm not able to attend.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce all of you and welcome all of you. Welcome Mr. J.D. Patil on the podium. A very quick introduction. He's the member of the Executive Council of Management of Larsen & Toubro, served on the board of L&T as whole-time Director, Defense and Smart Technologies, advisor. No, I'm not going to stop. I have to do my job. Advisor to the CEO and MD for L&T's Defense and New Age Smart Technology businesses. He has been instrumental in growing the nascent technology and product development group in L&T's corporate R&D. He spearheaded L&T's foray in the defense sector since the inception of the segment, and he oversaw the evolution of L&T's space businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, over 4-decade-long illustrious career in L&T. Please welcome Mr. J.D. Patil.
Thank you. It starts being, one gets a feeling of getting old when somebody talks of 4.5 decades of being in the sector. For all of us, the era in which we all began in the sector, defense was kind of a closed economy. I think for few of us who made a difference as on that day, and that has a relevance to the theme today, that few companies in this country decided that future is going to be lying in looking after the security. Welcomed, I must say, wholeheartedly by the Navy those days in the 80s, and of course by defense research, huge amount of capabilities that got developed over this period. When I look at India today, despite whatever one obviously speaks about the positive kind of right policies and the kind of targets which the government has taken for itself in terms of exports, today we are, in a way, call it a yet another power center emerging for a very simple reason. We export to nearly 85 countries. Our exports have started growing, and we joined the CIPRI list just about a couple of years back. Although we stand today at number 23, which is not so great, the fact that we are the largest importer, and from that to get into an export list, 21,000 plus 21,700 crores of export last year, but yes, the targets are at least thrice of this number within next 4 years. The indigenous production, which was not yet just about 40,000 crores, less than 8 years back, today we look at a number which is 126,000 crores. And what is most important is, since the time when Nitin started this conclave, with Manohar Parrikar in the helm at that point in time, the IDDM is one of those best things that happened to India, and the confidence of the industry started showing up in their own capability of basic fundamental research and design of equipment. I would say, having moved to the 9th conclave, and I am one of those fixtures of this conclave, 9th year I am here. And of course, over this year, what I notice is here's India, who, if our organizations decide to do things, we can do things far superior, far better, far faster than anybody else in the world. And a good example of a collaboration between the user, defense research, and an industry, one shining, we can talk of the Zorawar. General Man is right, seated here. All of us have lived through that journey. There is no country that, from the contract to fielding of a tank, has happened in 19 months. Yes, 19 months. Now, when we can do our own basic research, this is what a couple of years down the line, as an industry, we are able to build. While in India, we have multiple thousands of tanks in service, we know that we are unable to even upgrade our own tanks, and for T-72 upgrades, we had to look at one of the friendly countries. Now, this scenario of exactly 2 decades back to today, what has changed? I think what has changed really is the ability of the decision makers in this country to decide to empower and to say, we have a beautiful story in Ramayana which talks of Hanuman didn't know how to jump to Sri Lanka. He needed somebody else to tell him, and Wali had to tell him, you can jump. I think the role which essentially our leadership, with Manohar Parrikar actually having started this, was that you all can do, and I create a specific category. It's heartening to see nearly 3/4 of our acquisition physically being categorized under IDDM. So I think this is an era where one can very clearly say India has arrived. We are able today to think of abstract requirements two definitive requirements which a user puts in and be able to conceptualize these into a product and create that product in record times. Innovation and capability of Indian minds has never been a challenge, and today we see this is a capability which is on ground. I've just given one example. I can give multiple examples. I see Tyagiji sitting at that corner and looking at me, multiple of them. HAL has multiple such success stories. Given the kind of environment we are operating in, my belief is we only have to trust our own capabilities. And that's when it's heartening that when we had serious debate with the Army Design Bureau and of course Army Headquarters, a strategic partnership set of programs for all the tanks actually got converted into IDDM. And that's exactly we see the future evolving. I don't have to keep talking of the naval examples because naval examples far too much more galore, and the indigenization in true sense started happening with the Navy in this country. All of us as industry start seeing few things which obviously have happened, which have been amazingly good, but there's far more to be done. And I'll specifically touch upon, for that evolving India to reach that 3 lakh crores of defense production output of 2029, much more needs to be done. Today our defense output out of private sector is range bound. It's exactly 21%. While the government keeps talking budget after budget that 25% is being reserved, today it still struggles for couple of years at 20-21%. There's much more to happen. There's still a need of that mindset change and opening up of the minds, especially in certain strata of our decision making. Only that will make this happen. Today, we don't have to copy, and it becomes important when we are talking of a stabilizing power as India. We need to start thinking what we need to achieve. Freely share and discuss and debate these points, and I think solution will emerge. Till such time, we think that there is only one segment of the security apparatus can sit and discuss and decide. I don't think we would reach anywhere. And today is an era where the industry ought to be on that decision-making discussion tables to take it forward. My last point, Air Marshal Sandeep Singh talked about the chip. I was last week in the Semicon, and we announced at Larsen & Toubro, which again is the responsibility which I share today, to incubate India's first product fabless semiconductor company. It's a bold step to say that there are NVIDIAs and there will be an Indian company who today is just born, exactly 10 months, and we are designing and building our future chips. We are 8 deals through in last 8 months, and hopefully within next 2 to 3 years, we'll be a serious player to watch. Now, this is essentially where the most important aspect of the decision making, and we've seen what a friendly country has done just about 2 days back, and that's the power of what you can put into that small microgram or 2 nanometer, 5 nanometer thick piece of sand grain of sand, which it can do. And I think this is an aspect which again, if it has to move forward, there's far higher level of debate and discussion needed, because unless the domain decides what is required to be done or what is required, industry will go its own way. We would have gone pure commercial way and we would have delivered what the commercial markets look for. Military is not something which can be run the same way, the commercial way. There's customizations and there's specific aspects of this which are needed. And this is an aspect which I believe, again, a collaboration, discussion, debate can facilitate that. And I think Nitin's forum is the right kind of forum to initiate this kind of a talk for a simple reason. We are right on the verge while we speak to have a yet another major reform in the defense policies to be initiated. DAP 25 is round the corner. Discussions is the only way. We obviously can look forward to that era where we sit together, decide those capabilities which don't exist in the world. The multiple things that India has done, which are ahead of most of the other countries, and I think if we all put our minds together, uniform, the R&D establishment, the industry, I don't think there's any limit to what we can do. This is an era of India having arrived, and I think we'll move from strength to strength. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. Next, I would like to call upon and first introduce to you all Mr. Ross McInnes, the chairman of the Safran Group. An Oxford University graduate, he started his career in 1977 with a leading investment bank. He joined Safran in March 2009 as executive vice president and has been the chairman since 2015. He was made a Knight of the Legion d'Honneur, I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right, sir, in 2008 and promoted to officer in 2017. Can I please have Mr. Ross McInnes on the podium? Thank you so much. Can I have a round of applause? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'd like to kick off today thanking you all, and particularly Nitin, for having me over as a keynote speaker today. Safran is very proud here to be before you. We're proud for the solid platform which have built by Safran companies over the past 65 years of activity in India and as many years of a most fruitful collaboration partnership. We're very proud to be the pioneer for defense and aerospace technologies in India, which provide the right support to make in India policies. This model of collaboration is at the heart of what France and Safran can offer in India. Given the relation of deep trust between us, self-sufficiency, sovereignty, and the capacity to not only acquire, but develop equipment which is critical to sovereignty, such as military aircraft engine, according to your own requirements. More on this later. We're very proud, as the Air Chief Marshal will know, that every fixed and rotary wing aircraft of the Indian Air Force flies at least one Safran component or engine. Proud that most tank and artillery guns, upgrades and new, have Safran inertial and optical devices, and that your submarines have Safran periscopes or inertial navigation systems. We're also very proud, thank you, that Indian skies have for several decades and will continue to be for many decades to come protected by fighter aircraft, Mirage 2000 and Rafale, fitted with Safran engines and flying Safran equipment. We're also very proud of our many fruitful collaborations with Hindustan Aeronautic Limited on multiple technologies and projects, symbolically and importantly, the Shakti engines that power helicopters made by HAL, and tomorrow we've completed our joint venture signing for a role for the Indian multi-role helicopter, which will be powered by the Aravali engine, entirely co-designed and co-developed by HAL and Safran. And on the civil front, the largest LEAP civil engine MRO facility is currently under construction, the largest in the world, in Hyderabad. I'll come back to that later. France and India have always been true friends and will remain so in decades to come. We are two countries with a strong sense of strategic autonomy. For us, for France, these are not words, but they're very much the foundation of our strategic posture and of our military spending. France supports India's strategic, diplomatic, and economic emergence. We have stood by your side through thick and thin, and our strategic cooperation has grown broader and deeper over decades, regardless of the political majorities in Paris or in New Delhi. Same cannot be said of any of your other Western partners. France was, after all, the only Western country that stood with India after the nuclear tests in 1998, and instead of seeking its isolation, immediately began a strategic dialogue still very active today. And here again, I want to stress, these are not just political nice-to-haves for a country attached to its freedom of action. We have never viewed export licenses for defense equipment as a tool to coerce or indeed influence a partner. So this combination of political consistency vis-à-vis India over the decades and our licensing history vis-à-vis India creates a unique partnership between the two countries, which serves as a rock-solid and predictable framework for defense industrial cooperation. Given this predictability and dependability, critical criteria for the choice of partner or acquisition, it is logical that France is one of India's main partners for defense equipment through numerous industrial cooperations. The signing of the contract for the supply of 36 Rafale in 2016 came in addition to contracts for Scorpion submarines and those for the modernization of the 51 Rafale Mirage 2000, which have been in service since 1984. If, after this, the Indian Air Force chooses Rafale for its future bid of 114 fighters, Safran plans to transfer a substantial part of production and assembly of our equipment for the Rafale in India, including our M88 engine. And I trust, closer now in time, the Navy Rafale contract will make this cooperation even stronger. And because France understands what sovereignty means and what it's about, and what it requires in very practical terms, we're keen to contribute to India's policy of strategic autonomy in the defense sector. For this, we are willing to share technologies with India in order to contribute to it becoming fully sovereign in the defense equipment area. Now, I mentioned practicalities. What does this mean? This means that we share the technologies and the know-how, as well as the know-why, that will allow India to learn how to design and develop and manufacture the most advanced equipment by itself, and to use it as it sees fit, with no strings attached, as well as to export it. We're willing to share technologies with India that we share with no other country, and I believe that France is the only partner which India has who is willing to do so. This is very different from manufacturing TOT, which would only allow India to know how to manufacture an engine, to take an example, that fundamentally will remain someone else's, especially on military jet engines. As I mentioned earlier, 2 weeks ago, Safran helicopter engine HAL signed the contract to develop and deliver the next generation turboshaft engine for India's medium lift helicopter, Indian multi-role helicopter, and also subsequently for the deck-based version for the Navy. I mentioned earlier that we have been working with HAL on Shakti engines, powering and produced with HAL for the helicopters. Now, looking forward, while we wait for the decision of the Indian government, we have offered to work with the DRDO to co-develop a military jet engine in India with full transfer of technology and complete manufacturing of the engine on Indian soil. It'll be a long-term effort by both sides with a very, very long-term impact on the whole Indian aerospace ecosystem. Our aim is firmly to support the Make in India for the World objective of the India government. On a personal note, I am very attached to India as it is the country of my birth. I was born in Kolkata, so indeed, literally, I was made in India, and quite naturally support the policy. I hope to be back in 2025 to see more inaugurations and new ventures from Safran in India. We shall launch the operations of our largest civil LEAP engine MRO facility in Hyderabad, along with the helicopter engine MRO facility for our JV with HAL in Goa. I wish you, Nitin, and all the participants a great success for this seminar. And remember, there'll be my concluding words on sovereignty. Others promise, France delivers. Check the record. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Mr. Ross McInnes, the chairman of the Safran Group. And now it is my pleasure to introduce and call upon Mr. Hugh Jeffrey, Deputy Secretary, Strategy, Policy and Industry of Australia, who has a background in foreign national security policy and intelligence. He was appointed to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Office of National Assessments. He was former Minister Counselor at the Embassy of Australia in Washington, D.C. and NATO in Afghanistan. He was appointed to the Department of Defense in August 2018. Can I have a round of applause for him, please? Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Nitin. Great to be here, and thank you, Ross. I learned something about you today. I didn't realise you were made in India. I can't claim the same, unfortunately, but I'm delighted to be here. And this is as with France, India remains has become one of our most important defence partners in recent years, and the relationship has really transformed in a manner that few of us expected, and in terms of operational cooperation, intelligence sharing, and strategic cooperation. It's gone from a relatively low base a decade ago to now really being in our top tier of partners. And that is all a function of our strategic circumstances. And I don't think anybody really needs to be, will anybody disagree with me here that our strategic circumstances have changed profoundly, and that there is a transition going on today where the balance of power, not only in the region but also globally, is shifting. And as defence professionals, it's vital that we think about that transition and about the risks that it brings, and it is something that we need to engage on very deeply, and from my perspective, and my country at least, with some humility as well. I often think about, as a young Australian beginning my working life in the 90s, that generation saw itself as the inheritors of the peaceful conclusion of the Cold War, and we grew up in the foothills of the post-Cold War order. And we really imbibed the inherently optimistic assumptions of that peaceful conclusion. And I think you're all aware of those assumptions, that strategic competition had ended, that the great questions of politics had been answered, that the world was now flat, that we could afford to invest in the theory of comparative advantage, and potential challenges to the international order would come to see that their best interests were served by integrating with that order rather than challenging it. And also, crucially, it was assumed that through the construction of a global and interdependent supply chain, that would be an answer to conflict, because it would inoculate us to the resumption of major power conflict of the kind that we saw in World War II. Principally because if you all are interdependent, if you all rely on each other for your trade and prosperity, then you don't go to war with each other. Now, just about 3.5 decades later, I think few of us believe that those assumptions have fared particularly well. Strategic competition didn't end, newsflash, it just abated. Now competition has returned to levels not only that we haven't seen since the Cold War, but by some of the metrics that we track inside defence now begin to exceed what we saw during the high points of the Cold War. You know, power and ideology are now obviously deeply contested once more. The consensus around globalisation, dynamic trade and multilateralism is now giving way to an era of geopolitical contest in which economic dependencies risk turning into vulnerabilities. So the reality is that the post-Cold War has come to an end, and with it, its strategic certainties. A new global order or some kind of new equilibrium will emerge at some point, but we're not there yet. And in place of that old order is simply a struggle among states as they vie with each other to shape the contours of the new order to follow. And that struggle, in my view, won't be contained and it won't be quick. And it will span hard and soft power domains, trade and economics, innovation, technology and industry. And in defence, we recognise that struggle as structural, not incidental. And what I mean by that is it will drive elevated levels of risk and uncertainty for at least the next decade, but likely beyond that too. And in my view, our overriding job as defence professionals in this context is to ensure that we can arrive at a set of conditions such that this struggle doesn't tip over into catastrophic confrontation. We have already had, I think, one very serious failure, and that is the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. I see Ukraine as the first war of this struggle, because I do not believe it is just an attempt by one state to subjugate another. It is rather part of an attempt by Russia to reverse the post-Cold War security order in Europe through force, and by extension, obtain a much more influential place in the international system to shift it in ways that meets its interests. And we see this principally as a failure of deterrence. And we need to ensure that there is no such repeat failure in the Indo-Pacific. And I think the onus is most acute on us in this region, because that is ultimately the venue, the world's most consequential strategic dynamic, which is US-China competition. Now, for Australia, this has led to a profound shift in our defence strategy. We now describe our strategic environment as deteriorating for the first time in the history of our nations, or the first time really since World War II. And that has driven a complete rethink about how we go about the defence of Australia. Australia has a national defence strategy which was released this year and requires defence to build a self-reliant set of capabilities that deter force projection against Australia and can help us prevent regional contingencies that would be catastrophic for us all. And in so doing, we aim to contribute to a new strategic equilibrium in the Indo-Pacific, where countries are sovereign, free from coercion, and where disputes over territory are managed peacefully in accordance with international law. But the harsh reality, of course, is that none of that is practically possible absent an effective balance of military power in the Indo-Pacific that renders force too costly and the peace too valuable. But on current investment rates, the problem we have is that we are potentially on the pathway to an imbalance of military power. And I don't need to remind you, in geopolitics, imbalance is provocative. So Australia sees its investments in military capability as a prudent and necessary contribution to that balance of power. Australia has decided, this government has decided to spend up to 2.4% of its $2 trillion economy on defence, and that will likely grow given the capability and set envisaged by our defence strategy. But one thing that's very clear about this is that we won't be able to build this self-reliant deterrent capability without operationalising our partnerships in much more fundamental ways, and not just in the mill-to-mill domain, but crucially, of course, in SNT and in industry. Now, this is not a new objective. We've been doing this for a number of years, but it now has new urgency in the Australian system. And before I close and this long list of esteemed colleagues and get to questions, I'd just like to offer 6 points that have struck me in the context of this job about our efforts to build closer industry partnerships with our partners. The first one is, and maybe this is controversial, but I'm trying to be provocative here, is that we need to abandon the dream of autarky. Modern warfighting kit is only growing in complexity, and the idea that states can completely be self-sufficient is unrealistic. Rather, it will be the states that can assemble a network of defence industry partners that not only act as a force multiplier for our own efforts, but also will withstand the pressures and challenges of intensifying geopolitical contest. The second principle is that to forge such a network, we need to reduce barriers. Although it is logical to seek partners on defence industry and to take advantage of each country's strengths and to build economies of scale, in reality, all of our countries have a deep thicket of laws, regulations, commercial and administrative procedures that in practice preclude that kind of deep cooperation. And this occurs even among close allies, like, say, Australia and the United States. And it's notable, for example, that all the FTAs that Australia has signed with its partners have carved out defence industry, right? So none of us have an FTA in defence industry. And there are good reasons for that, non-proliferation reasons, but also industry protection reasons as well. But given the challenges now, it is that we need to actually build that network, but I just want to underline that it's easier to say than to do, and we need to go into this with the determination to reform and to build a global supply chain of trusted partners that is less vulnerable to disruption or coercion in a crisis. My third point is that we must invest also in information protection. Closer industrial cooperation depends on sharing more, no doubt about that, but it will depend on how confident countries are that those technological advantages are protected. I've had to deal with this day in, day out, but particularly through new legislation that Australia has introduced this year and passed this year to reform our export control regime precisely so that we can establish a licence-free defence trade agreement between the United States and the United Kingdom. It's the first such agreement that we've ever struck with two other countries, and it takes a lot of work to ensure that our companies no longer need to seek a licence from the government in order to share controlled and highly sensitive technology between those three partners. But this is something that we want to extend to others, we want to work on with others. The fourth one is that defence trade now requires, I think, we need to recognise greater alignment of values and interests. Now, this is probably an obvious point for everybody, but sometimes overlooked. Real collaboration on capability won't occur unless states are confident that it's underpinned by shared strategic objectives, that it won't proliferate and that it won't make its way into the hands of potential adversaries. So for me, what has been so important is around meaningful defence industry cooperation has been that it will occur among trusted groups of states who share common values and interests, and of course India stands out for Australia in that context. 5, there must be a more effective division of labour given the growing supply chain constraints. One key lesson of Ukraine, if there is one key lesson, is that it has served to remind countries that their security is only as good as the hard power that underpins it. But what that's doing is creating a massive logjam. We are all investing now in hard power at the same time. We all want similar things, and we're all discovering that these supply chains contain critical vulnerabilities and constraints. And so the idea that we all just load up on that existing supply chain without figuring out a more effective division of labour and how we manage economies of scale isn't sensible. And so these types of partnerships need to become more business as usual than the exception. One example I will give you is Australia's Guided Weapons and Explosive Enterprise. This is the decision to build in Australia key components of the guided munitions supply chain with our partners. The idea that we would build our own guided munitions from scratch is not viable. What we want to do is contribute component parts that are critical constraints to our partners such that we can expand the overall supply chain. And sixth and finally, to talk about sovereignty. And this is my view, I think we need to redefine how we think about sovereignty. It's vital to us all. And I often hear, sometimes from my Southeast Asian colleagues, that the best way for Australia to maximise its sovereignty is to establish some kind of equidistance between the great powers. But frankly, my judgment is that Australia has greater sovereign agency within a network of allies and partners, and that going it alone will only narrow the political space within which our elected representatives have to make decisions in the national interest. It will narrow that space, not expand it. And the same is true really for capability in defence industry. You know, satellite communications, something Australia's thinking deeply about now, is a good example. What is more sovereign in your mind? A satellite that Australia owns and controls and puts up into space, but is the first thing to go in the event of a contingency? Or an investment we make in a network of partners for a consortium of satellite communications that is much more resilient and redundant and will withstand the first onset of conflict. So again, we have to think about how do we achieve sovereign agency? Is it in a network of partners or is it going it alone? And Australia has increasingly come to the conclusion that in a contested strategic environment, doing it with partners has got the greatest efficacy. And of course, as I want to underline, for India, for us, India is one of those key partners. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the conversations ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jeffrey. And now for the inaugural address, Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary, Chief of the Air Staff. He was formerly Deputy Chief of Air Staff, where he spearheaded major procurements for the Indian Air Force. He has served as the Assistant Chief of Air Staff, Air Defense. He served as instructor at Defense Services Staff College in India and Zambia, and he's a Cat A flying instructor with over 3,800 flying hours. I request you, sir, to please deliver the inaugural address. Can I have a round of applause for the Chief of Air Staff? Thank you.
Distinguished guests, representatives from the industry, friends from the media, defense attaches, military veterans, Coastmates, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. At the outset, let me thank and congratulate Nitin for having and his team at Bharat Shakti for organizing this conclave 9 times in a row and for having invited me for a 3rd time in a row here. It's a great pleasure indeed to be here at the inaugural session of this conclave to discuss how India can be a stabilizing force in today's world full of uncertainties. The VUCA world represents a new paradigm where volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity would shape decision-making at every level. Whether it is in geopolitics, modern warfighting, or business, success in VUCA world will require agility, resilience, collaboration, and a readiness to embrace uncertainty. The environment is challenging, but also offers opportunities to those who can adapt. To put things into perspective, I would like to introduce Colonel John Boyd's OODA loop into the equation and discuss how the OODA loop helps in an uncertain world. The OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. This loop's iterative nature encourages continuous reassessment, which is crucial in a volatile and uncertain environment. As the situation changes, the loop helps to quickly cycle back through the stages to adapt decisions accordingly. Similarly, complexity and ambiguity in an unstable world requires decision makers to be open to new information and avoid being locked into a single course of action. The Orient phase helps manage complexity by ensuring decisions are based on emerging new data and considering multiple perspectives, while the Act phase helps in managing ambiguity through decisive actions with the ability to pivot. This OODA loop offers a structured yet a very flexible framework to address rapid change, uncertainty, and complexity. It equips leaders to observe real-time developments, orient themselves in a complex environment, make decisions in the face of uncertainty, and act swiftly, all the while adapting to new information. I feel that the combination of VUCA analysis and the OODA loop provides a novel approach to navigating the modern and unpredictable world that we all live in. Countries today face a range of new-age threats that are different from the traditional military or economic risks of the past. These threats are often complex, transnational, and multifaceted. Coupled with this is the emergence of hybrid warfare, blending traditional military aggression with cyber attacks, disinformation, and economic coercion. A powerful and effective means for India to face these challenges is through collaboration. Collaboration with industry, academia, partner nations, and emerging markets will be key to negotiating these turbulent times. As India faces these challenges, reliance on external sources for critical infrastructure, technologies, and defense capabilities can create vulnerabilities. In my opinion, self-reliance is not about isolation, but also about strengthening internal capabilities and capacities to face external challenges. It involves building robust domestic industries, investing in innovation, securing critical infrastructure, and reducing vulnerabilities to external manipulation. According to the latest CIPRI report, India remained the largest arms exporter in the world between 2019 to 2023, with imports increasing by 4.7% as compared to the previous period of 2014 to 18. For India to become self-reliant in defense, a comprehensive approach across multiple sectors is required, combining technological innovation, structural reforms, and strategic planning. Firstly, we must strengthen domestic research and development, encouraging public-private partnerships to enhance innovation to make up for the gap in expertise. To foster such a culture, there is a need to encourage such research and development at the college level. Our education system, therefore, needs to be revamped completely to harness and nurture talent. The brain drain that we have seen in the past a few decades has not reduced, and we need to offer better incentives to skilled professionals to help retain the talent. This must become our topmost priority. Secondly, we need to expand and diversify our defense industrial base. While we have already signed many defense contracts with private players to foster competition and innovation, there is a need for us to build our local supply chains for critical components like electronics and advanced materials. Thirdly, there is a need to accelerate our indigenous programs. This can only happen if we adopt agile project management techniques to minimize time and cost overruns that have historically affected some of our defense programs. There is a need to bring in accountability because we are dealing with national security. We must enhance oversight by establishing bodies to monitor defense procurement processes to ensure timely completion of projects and reduce inefficiencies. Fourthly, India should leverage its defense relationship with global powers to obtain technology transfers which can boost indigenous manufacturing. Forming joint ventures will help develop domestic capabilities. These partnerships can also be crucial in fostering innovation and transferring manufacturing expertise to Indian companies. Without neglecting the established areas of capability, it is vital that India prepares itself better for what is going to come in future. We must develop innovative processes to cater for evolving defense needs in quick time. A case in point is what we had called the Meher Baba drone competition that the Indian Air Force conceived and launched back in 2017. With an initial investment of just about 17 crores towards the conduct of the competition, the participants today have got orders worth more than 2,000 crores. They have provided employment to more than 1,200 skilled manpower. More importantly, today there is a vibrant drone industry which has emerged in India, and a testimony to the same are the Drone Olympics conducted during the 2019 Aero India show, the 1,000 drone display during beating retreat ceremony of this January 22, the Drone Shakti with the Drone Federation of India last year, and the multi-crore contracts being awarded to various startups and domestic players. To support indigenization of defense in technology, India needs to invest in training of our scientists and engineers in advanced fields like robotics, AI, modern aero engine technologies, space technologies, and so on. Establishing specialized institutions to train future professionals will bridge the skill gap in these sectors. As a part of our indigenization drive, we must expand our defense exports, both to enhance domestic production capabilities and to gain a foothold in the global defense market. Greater focus on exporting high-end systems will improve economy of scale. There is a need for us to target new markets across the globe for defense exports. Partnering with developing nations will help foster diplomatic ties and also secure future markets. A lot of impetus has been given by our national leadership in enhancing defense manufacturing in India in the past few years. A record 75% of defense capital procurement budget was earmarked for the domestic industry last year, up from 68% in the previous fiscal. Self-reliance in defense not only contributes towards national development by boosting economy and creating jobs, it also helps in capitalizing the demographic dividend advantage that India has today. To achieve self-reliance, India needs to carry out targeted collaborations with key stakeholders to enable transfer of technology, expertise sharing, and developing of manufacturing infrastructure. It needs to be a multi-pronged approach with collaborations across sectors, ranging from foreign partnerships and private industry involvement to academic research and development with startups for niche technologies. I have touched upon certain key imperatives that we must focus on to improve our defense manufacturing ecosystem. These are by no means exhaustive, and there are many other areas which need to be addressed. Towards this, it is essential that the end users and the developers work hand in glove. We must cross-pollinate between industry and the Air Force to ensure that India at 100 years possesses an Air Force that is capable of addressing all challenges that are likely to be posed 25 years from now. In the words of the Honorable Prime Minister, the formula for self-reliance, also called the 5I, of intent, inclusion, investment, infrastructure, and innovation, is the way ahead to make in India and make for the world. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world increasingly marked by disruptions and shifts, India's role as a stabilizing force stems from its ability to leverage its strategic autonomy, geopolitical position, economic growth, technological expertise, and of course, cultural influence. By navigating the complexities of modern world with a balanced approach, India has the potential to offer leadership that promotes global peace, development, and cooperation. In the end, once again, I would like to compliment Nitin and his team at Bharat Shakti for organizing this annual conclave. And I'm confident that the discussions and the takeaways from here and the thoughts that are shared amongst all of you will be converted into a tangible roadmap for a brighter future. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir. That was Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary, Chief of the Air Staff. And now it is time for the Bharat Shakti Lifetime Achievement Award Ceremony. And I hand over this part of the session to Nitin Gokhale. Thank you.
Thank you, Niranjana. I said in my opening remarks that we'll talk more about the award and the person who is receiving it this time. Ambassador Satish Chandra does not need any introduction really in the strategic circles, but for those of you who may not have kept track of what happened 25 years ago and what he did in his career as a Foreign Service officer and later as the first deputy to the National Security Advisor between 1999 and 2005, we have put together a small clip of about 2.5 to 3 minutes. All that I have to say about this award, we instituted this award last year, and the combination of factors actually determined why we instituted this award. One is, of course, the contribution of so many people to national security and its strengthening of national security structures has to be recognized because of their work, today India is where India is, or is about to go further from here. And the second aspect of it was that many of these people, in my journey as a journalist and analyst, commentator since 1983, have contributed to my personal growth. They have mentored me, they have helped me along, guided me, and therefore I thought I must pay back my respect, my gratitude to all of them. And so one of them is Ambassador Satish Chandra, but have a look at this film and then we will honor him and we'll ask him to then speak. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Satish Chandra has been serving the country for nearly 6 decades in different roles. Career diplomat, institution builder, guru to many a national security practitioner, he has handled each role with calm professionalism. His wise counsel and varied interests have spawned many crucial assignments, be it as India's envoy to Pakistan or as president of the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. Ambassador Satish Chandra excelled in each role he was assigned, keeping national interest paramount. In a diplomatic career spanning 40 years, his postings took Ambassador Chandra to as varied Indian missions as in Vienna, Karachi, Washington DC, Algiers and Dhaka, giving him insights into the complex world of international relations. A voracious reader and in later years a prolific writer, Ambassador Chandra continues to offer his valuable advice to the strategic community as Vice Chairman of the Executive Committee at the well-known think tank Vivekanand International Foundation. However, his most important contribution to the nation was to set up the National Security Council Secretariat in the immediate aftermath of the 1999 Kargil conflict and nurture it through the initial teething phase. The salience gained by the NSCS in the current national security architecture would not have been possible but for the strong foundation built by Ambassador Chandra and his team between 1999 and 2005. The ethos, the standard operating procedures and the philosophy established at the NSCS in the early years now serve as a guidebook for India's national security institutions a quarter century later. Ambassador Satish Chandra's erudition and his belief in India's inherent civilization strengths has contributed to many crucial policy decisions. Like many others, Bharat Shakti and its founder Conclave have benefited from the sage advice and guidance from Ambassador Satish Chandra, who is the recipient of the second annual Bharat Shakti Lifetime Achievement Award for contribution to national security.
Eminent speakers on the dais, distinguished participants and guests, and of course Nitin and his wonderful team at Bharat Shakti, who have organized this extremely important event, the 9th edition of the India Defence Conclave. I'm really delighted to be here for many, many reasons. Very importantly, because I see in the audience here so many dear friends also with whom I share many memories and with whom we work together. I would like to say, Nitin, that I am greatly honored and touched on being accorded the Bharat Shakti Lifetime Achievement Award, which I'll greatly cherish, always. I must also thank you and your team for the excellent film that was produced, which I was seeing for the first time. It was great. And particularly the photographer and the crew who had come across to my house to do that. I'm honored because Nitin and the platforms through which he operates, notably Bharat Shakti, as well as Strat News, Interstellar News, all think, breathe, and dream security. So what could be a higher honor for me than to get an award from this group of people? Nitin, I'm sure you'll all agree, has done a fantastic job in terms of creating, through his writings, and he is a prolific writer, not me so much, but also his platforms. Creation of such security awareness is critical in nation building, and it resonates with me greatly because this is something when NSCS was set up, was on our agenda, and in a very, very small way, with Dr. Gupta, who is seated here, with his help, we started this exercise actually there, way back in 2001 or something like that. My association with Nitin goes back to 2.5 decades. It was shortly after the Kargil conflict when we had a committee to go into this and examine what all happened. We interviewed about 150 people, from the Prime Minister to many others. But what struck me and us in interviewing Nitin to get his insights into the conflict which he covered was a very wise head on then very young shoulders. And our association, therefore, has naturally continued over the years, and certainly it has benefited me. I'm also very touched because giving this award demonstrates very clearly that Nitin doesn't forget friends who are like me in their dotage. And I am really touched because of this. But this is only one of Nitin's many other remarkable qualities. And one that comes to mind is immediately, apart from his generosity in giving me this award, is that he is the ultimate optimizer. So, when he asked me to, and he told me that he would be giving this award to me, said, but you know, you must give a talk as well. So that was a part of the exercise. He is the ultimate optimizer. Now to get down to the business end and really say that what he asked me to talk about, the theme that he put forth to me was India's role in the global order. I didn't react immediately, but I must say that I was more than a little perplexed with the topic, which I think would have been more appropriate as India's role in the world today. I simply say this because the world today is bereft of order, and it is in fact plunged in great uncertainty and in fact disorder, verging on anarchy. I will try to be brief, and if I ramble, I'm sure Nilanjana will interrupt me, as she should. My talk will be basically in 3 parts. First, my perceptions of the world today. Second, factors governing India's role. And my projection of the likely trajectory of India's role. So the first part, coming to the world today, clearly the Gaza conflict, the Ukraine war, Chinese expansionism underline the fact that the global system, which was established after World War II, is giving way to a world without order. And take it from me that the gravity of this would increase exponentially, as is being speculated by some, should China seize the moment to impose reunification on Taiwan, since the US is currently preoccupied with the Ukraine conflict and the Gaza conflict. Today, a US-led Western alliance squares off against a Sino-Russian entente. And many countries are uncomfortable with totally aligning themselves with either. Many of them retain linkages also with both. Thus, what we are seeing is a multipolar world characterized by issue-based partnerships of convenience. In this troubled environment, countries are increasingly embracing protectionist economic policies, raising the specter of economic fragmentation and emergence of rival trading blocs. This trend naturally is detrimental not only to development, but also to security. And the situation gets exacerbated as there is, accompanying this, a growing east-west divide and north-south polarization. Furthermore, and this is particularly worrisome, long-standing rules and norms like non-intervention in the internal affairs of other countries and the eschewing of expansionism have increasingly been flouted in recent times, often by those that preach adherence to them the most loudly. This has been accompanied by frequent imposition of unilateral sanction and weaponization of supplies, which have wrought massive economic damage and supply chain disruption. Many international institutions, like the UN Security Council, the UN Human Rights Commission, WTO, WHO, have not performed up to expectations. This is because some that actually established them have subverted them. As regards the UNSC, which my good friend MJ, who is sitting here, now says it's like the League of Nations, and he is right. But why? Structural reforms which could have better aligned global governance with geopolitical realities have been resisted. And this has actually thrown the world into the current complete disorder which we observe. The UNSC's failure has been particularly detrimental to maintenance of peace and security. In fact, as per CIPRI's estimates, in 2023, and I myself was aghast at this, there were as many as 52 countries experiencing armed conflicts with over 170,000 conflict-related fatalities. If these problems are not enough, which are really problems emerging from intersea differences between countries, the world is also beset by many existential challenges, notably terrorism, lack of progress on attaining sustainable development goals, increasing possibility of a nuclear holocaust, dangers of disruptive new technologies like AI, and the menace of climate change. On terrorism, let me say, and we have all seen it, it's unfortunate it continues, and it is significant to note that over 100 years ago, when World War I broke out and when the Gaza conflict has broken out last year, it was triggered by what? By terrorism. This remains a potent menace, and it remains so because some countries use it as an instrument of foreign policy, and others really find it difficult to speak out against the delinquents because they find it politically advantageous to soft pedal the matter. And I am very clear, because I have dealt with this issue for many decades of my career, in fact, that it cannot be effectively eliminated until anyone's terrorist is everyone's terrorist. I had spoken about sustainable development and our failures. Just pick up the Sustainable Development Goals Report 2024, and it shows that goals have either ground to a halt or reversed. As an example, as compared to 2019, in 2022, an additional 23 million people were pushed into extreme poverty, and over 100 million more suffered from hunger. Why has this happened? It's largely the result of the developed world, unfortunately not doing enough to help developing countries, and that's the finding of the report. And to leave you with even more gloom before I turn to the second part of what I'm going to say, if you look at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists report, it's moved its doomsday clock last year, and it still is there, to 90 seconds to midnight, up from 2 minutes to midnight in 2019, meaning that the world today is the closest ever in its history to total annihilation. The threats listed are significant, and I touched on them: nuclear holocaust, genetic engineering, AI, climate change. Okay, second part. Factors, if I ramble, let me know. Factors governing India's role. In my view, there are 4 factors which will govern its role. 1, comprehensive national power. 2, nature and quality of leadership. 3, civilizational values and ethos. 4, national interest. Our comprehensive national power is not insignificant. Given our size, 3.2 million square kilometers, population 1.4 billion, a military considered to be the 4th strongest in the world, an economy the 5th largest, and foreign exchange reserves nudging $700 billion. Quality of India's leadership, like that of any other country, has varied over the years. Happily, the current leadership is one of the most sure-footed that it has ever had. MJ used another expression in another context, nimble-footed. Yes, I'd agree with him. It is that. The third, India's civilizational values and ethos, which are essentially based, and one of the speakers mentioned this, on the concept of that the world is one family in which our leadership is firmly rooted, make it the quintessential status quo country with zero territorial ambitions. One that is intrinsically tolerant, non-threatening, and wired to promoting international well-being. Indeed, I'll go further. The vision of the oneness of the universe which inspires us is not limited just to mankind. It extends to all sentient beings and non-sentient things. And to elaborate further, just let me say that the latter is extremely important as it holds the key to sustainable development, which is the need of the hour if we are to avoid an apocalypse which stalks us by way of climate change. Finally, like any other country, India will always be primarily guided by its national interest and will not allow the same to be compromised at any cost. Being committed to becoming a developed country by 2047, it will naturally resist any moves directed at preventing this or at undermining the state. And now I'll come to the last, which is purely my own projections as to what is going to be our role in the next few years. And I will actually be brief here. I will go almost bullet points. Almost. You will indulge me if I ramble at 82 a little bit. First, Indian foreign policy will continue to be infused with the same energy, proactive approach and confidence which has characterized it in the last decade. India will increasingly be a shaper rather than an abstainer, and it will on no account accept a veto on its policy actions. Secondly, India's embrace of its Indianness and propagation of civilizational values shall only increase. This is to be welcomed because it is in these values, in these ideas, that we can find solutions to the problems which afflict us: international tensions, climate change, health, sustainable development. It is only through these values. India will be, third, a much-needed force for peace in our fractious world, as it has no territorial ambitions, favors dialogue over coercion, and wants to be a developed state by 2047, which requires peace and stability. Fourthly, and this is something which I cannot better, it is a quote which I picked up from our foreign minister's book, which I commend to everyone who hasn't read it, The India Way, and he says, and I agree with him, India will, and I quote, engage America, manage China, cultivate Europe, reassure Russia, bring Japan into play, draw neighbors in, extend the neighborhood, and extend traditional constituencies of support, unquote. Actually, and I had referred to this, that we are a multipolar world, this actually affords India the opportunity of reaching out to all countries, even to those inimical to each other, and it would be our endeavor to develop mutually beneficial convergences with as many countries as possible and build comfort into the world. These ties will be leveraged, I believe, by our leadership to energize both the Indian and the global economy, to promote peace and harmony, and to ease international tensions wherever possible. India's role will be constructive, and its voice that of reason. In this context, I'd like to underline because people have expressed doubts about this. Concepts of Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat are as much for our own self-sufficiency as to meet the needs of the entire international community and to promote supply chain security, which has seen much disruption due to irresponsible nationalist agendas. Fifthly, India will double down on its neighborhood first policy, which has been the focus of its special attention, particularly over the last decade. Through humanitarian assistance, disaster relief programs, economic development programs, meaningful connectivity undertakings, etc. I can go into figures, but I will not. But huge amounts of investments have been made. Sixthly, we will champion the cause of the South at all possible fora and be its voice. In this context, remember we hosted the third online Voice of the Global South only last month with the participation of over 120 countries. Thanks. Many thanks, yes. It may be recalled that we lobbied for inclusion of the African Union in the G20 and consistently made the case for more funds for the developed world. In fact, our own investments have been over $32 billion. Seventhly, we will focus on the importance of safeguarding the global commons. Given the sorry state of affairs of most international organizations, it is on the cards that India will push for their reform. And ninthly, in view of the dangers which are there of a nuclear holocaust, disruptive technologies, fragility of supply chains, I think India will offer solutions to those. And finally, we will play a very active role in addressing the challenges of climate change. Once again, our foreign minister, I couldn't term it better. He said that India is a credible champion of both climate action and climate justice by becoming an exemplar on renewables and an advocate of resourcing. I will not go on, but I will just like to conclude by saying that in this conflicted and anarchic world, India is not going to be a bystander. We will proactively play a constructive role, not only to promote peace and stability, but also produce solutions to the many existential challenges that we face. Thank you very much, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Satish Chandra. And with that, we come to the end of the inaugural session of the 9th India Defence Conclave. I request Nitin to please present mementos to all our dignitaries on stage. After that, may I also request all the defence attachés to please come up, get ready to... remain on stage. We'll just take a minute more of your time, sir. I know you're in a hurry. Request all the DAs to please come up, and we'll take a quick group photograph. Okay, we are meeting individually first. I request all the dignitaries on stage to remain on stage. Mr. Ross McInnes, could I have you on stage, please? Once again, thank you. All the defense attaches, please, a photograph. Request all the delegates to please proceed to the kiosk area. Please take a look at the kiosks and then proceed to have a cup of tea. We will assemble in 15 minutes. Sorry, I'm cutting the tea break short by 5 minutes. But if we can stick to agenda, we will. Air Marshal Sandeep Singh, please come up for the photograph. Thank you. Thank you so very much, gentlemen. Please proceed to the kiosk area. I request Nitin Gokhale to please escort our dignitaries on stage to the kiosk area. Please take a look at our kiosks, which has been put up very painstakingly by our partners. Request Karan and Aditya and Vashisht to please accompany for the photographs and the videos. Thank you.